Hello, I am Radagast with Global Mission of Peace TV, Mystic View. And of course, I'm joined always by my co-host, Shelley. Hello, Shelley.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
And we're adopting a new format where only the speaker shows. It's just allows us to maybe deal with our hair or things like that when we're off camera. Also, when we have more than one speaker, it makes it a lot easier for our graphics person. So we're doing it in a new format starting today. So anyway, our topic tonight is going to be, I guess, what is being called Nibiru or Planet X. And it's a subject that won't go away. I'm not sure that it should go away, but it's certainly a subject that has the normal kind of alternative and new age accretion of who knows what. And there's a lot of less than scientific minds discussing it. Not that you have to be a scientific mind to discuss it, but I think some of the ideas kind of are sometimes coming out there from more creativity necessary than research. What do you think about that, Shelley?
That's, of course, very valid, but the really beautiful thing is all of our astrophysicists and our science people that have actually taken an interest in it as well. We know we like to measure. We feel a great deal of validation when we can measure and pull things apart and give data. So this is what we're bringing forward for tonight. Actual data.
Yes, we do have some what I consider to be good data. We got it from an astronomer who spoke on TED Talk. And I guess the other thing is, this is not to necessarily say it is or it isn't, although I think we're going to lean towards something is there. What it's called, I don't know, is so necessary other than the something that's out there. And I also, the timetables, like while I was looking for some good data to look on this, and you see something, world will end not in 2016, but 2017 by Planet X. So, you have a lot of this dire kind of like the world is ending stuff around Planet X or Nibiru. And I think that especially might be something we would hope to remove. Not that we know that we can, but I'm not getting that sense. How about you?
I actually have quite a bit of fun calling it Nibiru or Planet X or whatever, and any name's as good as the next as far as I'm concerned. However, I like Nibiru because it's been spoken of for eons. It's been recorded for eons. And what I love about finding these words in our ancient mythology and ancient sacred texts is because that's what alerts me to the fact that if it's above, it's also below. So I start looking within the human body to find these things. And we can come back to that in a little bit, but I'm good with any name you want to call it. But
okay, well, I'm happy with either Nibiru or Planet X. I guess Nibiru. Why not? It has a name. Names are nice. I like names also. Planet X is kind of like it's almost like an algebraic planet. Fill in your own.
Although it's probably named and numbered as well. Mm-hmm. Do you have a name and number for it?
No, I don't have a name or number, but I do have the number of a star that's going to be part of the data that this astronomer was reporting because it's been very observed. And the name of the number of the star, or the name number, is KIC 8462852. So I guess if you have that number and you look into Google Sky, maybe you can find it. But apparently it's, as we'll see in the map, it's a kind of it's a grid that they laid over what looks to be the head of Cygnus. But again, that will be showing. And what it is there is something that's interfering with the normal starlight that's coming off this particular observed area. And I think there's, once again, observing this particular star. And earlier on in in the video I was watching, that they showed, like kind of like what it looks like like from one of our cameras of the sun, and showing what it kind of registers at in its normal light intensity. And as Jupiter passes through, you see a little dip in the light intensity. As the Earth passes over, you see even a tiny little blip in the intensity. So, of course, this is like interference from the light that's coming off the sun to whatever the recording equipment is. So what they have perceived and at this star, and that's, you know, outside our solar system, you know, it's in our galaxy. But what they're seeing is interferences that look to be multiples, like maybe of 100 or 1,000 times greater than Jupiter. That's a big object. And I don't know, should I start showing some of the graphs here? Do you think that would work?
Let's do that. Let's share while we're talking so that people can follow along visually.
Okay. So do you see my map? Okay. So what we're looking at is when you see this grid here, and I hope you can see my cursor going around it, that's the grid that they're observing. And as you can see, here's kind of like the neck of Cygnus. Cygnus, I think, means swan. So this would be the neck and I guess the beak of the swan. So this would be the head of the swan here, I think. Anyway, but this is what they're observing. And okay, that's that picture. So what we're going to look at, okay, we're going to look at this one first. This is a record. Now, once again, I don't have the Earth ones, but these kind of top lines would be what would be normal starlight intensity that's being picked up by the recording instrument. Now, this is in May 2009. And I'm going to enlarge this just a little bit so it can be seen a little better. But in the graph up here behind this woman, you can see what looks to be like a V. But if you look on if you look at my cursor, basically or if you're looking at the screen from left to right is how the time is. So it starts on the left and it travels to the right. And we can see some degradation of the light intensity over here, kind of a slow degradation, then it plummets down and then it recovers. And the bottom V is fairly similar. But if you notice, the degradation period is a lot more protracted or longer than the recovery period. You know, the recovery looks pretty much like a V. This other one kind of like gets jagged, and you can see there's a lot of little jaggedy things here. So it's almost as if like smaller stuff was kind of in the way, and then the main thing came out. Whatever it is, it certainly looks like not only is it large, but it looks like it might not be alone. So this is in May 2009. So then we get, okay, that's that. We go to February 2013. I'll enlarge this a little bit too. And so what we see in February 2013 over the course, and these are days, so from day 1520 to like day 1570, so roughly 50, 60 days, we see 3 interruptions. The first one is we start seeing that kind of little bit of degrading of intensity, back up, down, a little up, and then plummeting as if something really huge comes in and like really cuts down the light, and then a very quick recovery, a basic leveling off, but then another little dip, recovery, and then a deeper dip, but not as deep as the original, and a recovery. So this happened in 2013. So now there, you know, this person was somewhat conservative in what they had to say. And so they weren't naming it Nibiru. And they were, with the ideas they played with, one of them was a comet swarm, but the amount of comets required to all converge at the same time in the same place to produce an effect like that is kind of not been observed. And then there was also some theorizing that maybe a very advanced civilization was harvesting energy from the sun and what had built like the equivalent of large solar collectors, but maybe what they're collecting can turn into other elements, isn't necessarily about powering. And then there's also just other things in space moving around. And the opinion of this astronomer, she was going for natural and not alien contrived, even though she admitted, I love the idea of aliens doing things, but you know, that's where she went. And I think, of course, as a professional astronomer, it's, you know, being conservative is never bad for your career, especially when you're kind of really taking it really to the sidelines. So, did you get any impressions from all that?
Well, I like what you said at the very end there, that it's always in one's best career interest to remain as naturally oriented as possible. I had come across a really interesting video recently done by Paul Cox, whom I tried to contact. And as I was going through my list of people I could contact who might be able to contact Paul, since I was unable to through the Sleuth Observatory, that was the feedback I was getting, is that he was kind of having his hand slapped a bit and asked professionally to please quit referring to this orb, this star, as Nibiru. And so you saw, I believe, one or two of those videos perhaps before they were taken down, did you? Can you share with us what you gleaned from those?
Okay, the one video I saw apparently was a little bit of a feed, and it was from Sleuth Observatory in the Canary Islands of Spain. And apparently the voice speaking was Paul Cox himself. And he was just commenting, what they were observing was the transit of Mercury, which is, when you look at a picture of the sun, Mercury is like this little tiny dot going across it. I mean, almost every other feature on the sun is bigger than Mercury going across it. So, and Mercury was transiting the sun. So it was about, if you're looking at the sun, it was about to exit. It was on like kind of the upper right-hand side. So it was, you know, had a little bit more before it would no longer be in front of the sun. So we're kind of basically seeing what, if you're looking at the sun from our perspective, the right-hand curve of the sun, but it's the upper right-hand curve. And so you would, you know, as you know, there's usually some kind of light reflection. Well, in the interim space between the end of the sun and the end of the picture, there seemed to be another kind of almost coronasphere coming in from the other side, and the shape of the angle of it was of a sphere, but another sphere, like kind of like, you know, within that. In other words, if they had panned out a little bit more, we might have seen another sun, because whatever was there was throwing off enough light to create, again, this kind of like little, you know, light arc. That you would see like a corona. You know, you have a glowing object, and then you have the object itself, and then you have that kind of like this diffused light as kind of almost like an aura around it. And what you could see was clearly what looked like the aura of another lit object curving towards the sun. Like, you know, the sun was curving this way, and this one was coming that way. And that's what he mentioned. He goes, "Oh, look at that." He goes, "Oh, gee, could it be Nibiru?" He goes, "You know, we don't have to hide things like NASA does." And apparently that little bit, that just the fact that he used Nibiru and said that they don't have to hide things like NASA does, was kind of like, you know, for people who look for this stuff, one of two things. Nibiru gets mentioned by a reputable, a world-renowned astrophysicist, I guess he is. I don't know if he's just plain astronomer. And also, an astronomer is mentioning that NASA covers things up. So that's quite a mouthful.
That's quite a mouthful, but what's really important is it's simple to track, just perhaps in tracking photons, in tracking electrons. What we see is the pathway where they have traveled. It's like watching the wind blow through the trees. You're not seeing the wind, but you're seeing the effects of the wind. Mm. And so a lot of what the science has brought forward is the effects, the gravitational pulls on different bodies and this type of thing. However, there have been a lot of just organic, first-hand photos, people capturing this over the years, and many people, myself included, have had personal experiences directly. We're not just repeating what you know, some other video has reported about. So, for example, in 2011, I saw through a perspective that I was directed to use. So this is going to sound a little nebulous, we'll say, initially. So I'll just describe, as I was compelled each evening to go and look out at the setting sun. Now I'm compelled. There's like this force pulling in my solar plexus. looking straight ahead, I just see whatever the normal yard and horizon would hold. But as I looked just with the peripheral vision, what I saw was this very large orb, we'll call it, star, something approaching, and it had trailing around it. I couldn't count how many because there might have been some behind it that I wasn't seeing, but at least 3 or 4 other objects. So that sounds like a little mini solar system right there, all in itself. So that experience was very profound, but I have profound experiences like this, as you know, as a common occurrence in my life. So that was just one day, and it carried on and it carried on. I continued to have this tugging at me like, you have to see this, you have to see this. So I kept going up to our second floor windows, which are really wide, looking out at the west each night when the sun was setting. And I couldn't say no to this energy. It was compelling, it was pulling. I had to see whatever it was. And so each night I would look out. Now, here's the interesting component that aligns with the patterns of today. So this took place in May to June of 2011. At that time, there was vast fires in Arizona and vast fires in northern Alberta. So as all of that smoke is in the sky, you can imagine it has an effect on what you see and how you see it. Well, just to cut to the chase and kind of put this story in a nutshell, I had binoculars. So I do sun gazing, but obviously you don't do sun gazing through binoculars. But this one night, I'm making supper and I get the call through my solar plexus, that tug, oh, you have to go look quick. I grab my binoculars. I had my mom on the phone. And this is important because she's my witness to what happened here. I go up, I'm looking out the window. I'm looking through binoculars and I'm seeing this very large orb. It's like our sun on steroids. It's huge. It's massive. But as I'm speaking to my mom, I'm saying, Mom, our sun does not have rings going around it. The circumference, circumnavigating this orb was 3 or 4 kind of smoky rings. So the color was very deep sienna, reddish brown, as were the rings that were going around it. And I could watch and calculate, I could almost count how much time it took for those rings to navigate the circumference of that large planetary body. So I was very excited about this, and I don't live in the city, so I got Mom, of course, to get all the newspapers she could. Surely somebody would have done a story on this. Mm-hmm. But no, it was not mentioned. It was not mentioned at all. So I reached out to people like Jay Gilliland, Alfred Lambermont Weber, Carrie Cassidy. We had some dialogue about it over some time, and then it got dropped. But there's people like me all over this planet who have experienced directly, as I did, that this thing is out there and it's real. But okay, so here's some really good news. If there was anything dangerous about this, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, because this thing has been with us several years already. I saw it in 2011. It's been tracked in our history, ancient history. So if it's on an orbital path, say 26,500 years, mm-hmm. just to throw out a number, mm-hmm. that it comes around, it's been recorded and tracked. There's been pictures of it drawn in the 1700s. Mm. So my own personal experience, since I put everything in a nutshell and didn't give all the details, is that really it's the advent of the return of cosmic consciousness, or call it Christ consciousness. Mm. It's the cosmic kundalini happening, and when we see it happening in the stars, let those lights be for signs, it says mm-hmm. in the Bible. Those signs are that this is happening to us on a planetary level, on a solar level, on a physically personal level as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
So, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just saying, no, I've just noticed that there certainly seems to be some shaking up going on, and even the world. I mean, it's just you see one side, you see what we would consider to be benevolent and human oriented, stirring and trying to find its way, and you also see what we'll call the anti-human force, also kind of like as if like this is it. Like if they can't do whatever they're trying to do now, they know it's going to be too late. And so I really feel the energies really engaging each other. I mean, and just even in the past week, it seems like things are really picking up.
I agree. And many of the people and clients that I work with have repeated that same feeling, that it's been pretty intense, like living in a dipping into a twilight zone for a few days and then emerging back out the other side.
Yeah. But even after the emergence, it's almost like it's like an experience you just don't shake off.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's true.
it's deeply, it really, it seems to me that it's really requiring you to kind of find source and stay attached to it, or else you could really go off on some really strange trips.
Well, I do believe that would be the most graceful process,
Mm-hmm.
is to find your source and stay very closely aligned.
And so I want to go back just 1 minute and share screen. You let me know when the screen comes up, so that way we
Yes,
all.
we can see the screen now.
Okay, so what I want to do is this. This is a picture that you personally took, just a few days ago, and up in the upper part, that's our regular sun. Now, just below this tree, we see another, what certainly looks to be, if that's not another little star, then it's something behind the sun reflecting an awful lot of light back to us, like the moon might. But what would be there? I mean, none of the planets will produce something that large. I mean, even Jupiter on its biggest night isn't that big when it's reflecting. So whatever that is either generating its own light, or if it's not generating its own light, is very large behind the sun and reflecting back that light. Now, some people speak about lens flares, and one of the reasons why I particularly like this picture is that there's a tree here just kind of biting off the bottom of that bottom orb, and a lens flare could not find itself behind something. If it's a lens flare, it would be coming from the lens. It would be on that little. There wouldn't be that little nick there from the tree. The tree would be blotted out, and not the other way around. So the fact that there's just that little bit of blotting out at the bottom certainly tells me that that is behind the tree in the sky, and and at whatever distance it is, it's large. Now, if it's not as large as Jupiter, then it's a heck of a lot closer than Jupiter. But there certainly appears to be very legitimately something in our sky, and so, I mean, we're kind of having, personal anecdotal experience via you. Some of the kind of disturbances that it's creating. Now, by disturb doesn't mean anything negative. I mean, just like if you put your hand in the water, in shallow water, and you stir up some dirt, you didn't do anything bad. You just disturbed the bottom. So when people get disturbed by things, it just means that, some of the things are flying around and can resettle back and in whatever way they want. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So I guess a big part of this is, as we try from the mystic view to be topical about things that matter to our alternative community, Nibiru is something that very often, I mean, I haven't followed that much because I feel so much of the language and dialogue around it is sensational, not particularly scientific, a lot of new agey type stuff gets thrown into it, any number of things. And I think what we're trying to do here is get into the mystical aspect of it. Like this, it seems to be here. It seems to have an influence. Both of us are picking up that it isn't malevolent, that this is not something to dread. This is, could this could be a presage of great change, but whatever change it is certainly meant to be in our favor. And I guess it really kind of is down to humanity, how they will use this opportunity.
I think that's a really important point, and I'd really love for our viewers to give us some feedback, and I would really look for all the other groups out there that are also oriented toward the betterment of humanity and ditching the old paradigm and moving into a time of peace and love. Really, let's get together and find out the vast number of groups and individuals on this planet that are actually very aware of the love as who we are, and are no longer affected by the fear and by the old strategies that were once successfully used against us. Because we have moved beyond that, literally, in our little solar system, in our galaxy, we've actually moved beyond that point.
Yeah. One of the things I've, I kind of spoke in my earlier videos, especially when I was talking about what I think is very, almost like the Gnostic view, or let's call it a neo-Gnostic view of humanity. And where, we belong on this planet. Like, we have a very intimate connection to the planet, to the spirit of the planet, and the fact that we carry the God spark. And that the little bit that we're hearing from the various sources that tell us about their interactions and what they know with ET races, off-planet races, call them what you will, that there are some of them who, whether they never had it or lost it, no longer have that direct connection to source or to creator. And it's probably maybe one of the reasons why they try to belittle us, because we have something that they don't have. And they try to mask the fact that they actually feel inferior to us at the soul level by making it all about kind of like the bodily or technological level. And so this really is a good time to make the connection, and also the specialness of us as humanity being able to make that connection, because there are people who would presume to be our superiors who either never could, can't, no longer because they lost it. But it is a prize. It is one of the great, why there's so much interest in a planet that technologically is just scratching the surface of space. It still exhibits, at least from our leaders, a very warlike attitude. Now, I really believe that the average person is kind of carried on into war, just the way they used to carry the peasants into war. I really think that if we were left undisturbed and unprovoked, and especially if we were allowed to be a little happier, that nature would be very hard to draw out of humanity. So I really would like to tell everybody out there, if you're feeling a connection to source, just realize that apparently, which is a basic right for us, seems to be a privilege of sorts, or certainly something that you can lose, and we haven't lost it. So really treasure that connection and make use of it. If you want to know why you're on the planet, you will find it in that connection. And I like to think, if you want to find a place, don't do it in the head, do it in the heart. Make sure you're not dropping down into your solar plexus, because that's where you'll get a lot of mud. Make sure you're actually in the center of your chest, thinking of your heart. Try to imagine some kind of really rich, beautiful green to go with it. This is one I like to. You can use gold, but I find green works best. And I just want to share something with you, because you were talking about how, there's the observances, and then there's the effects. And I have a roommate, and he was watching some kind of science show, and it had to do with different treatments for cancer. But anyway, I don't even want to get into all of it. But apparently they were showing T cells at work, and it was mentioned in there that T cells have to become immunocompetent first. Now, what I learned when I was getting my training was that you do have certain T cells, and the T actually stands for the thymus gland. The thymus gland. That's what the T stands for. And the T cells go in there to become immunocompetent. And what that means is they now have this kind of like, they're like killer cells. But the immunocompetence makes sure that they know what is killable and what isn't, which is why in an autoimmune disease, your killer cells start attacking you because they now see self as the disease. That's kind of like a turning it. And then you have immune suppressant where they don't know anything. What's that? So an immunocompetent T cell will know the difference. Now, I remember mentioning to this person about the thymus being blue-green. It's between the heart and the will. And part of and why it was the perfect place to become immunocompetent is because you have the green, which will give you the heart and the wisdom to know the difference. And then you have blue, which I equate with the higher will. So you have the will to carry out your job, but it's a balance between knowing the right will to carry out, almost like carrying out spirit's will, creator's will. And I just mentioned the blue-green color. He goes, wow, that's really interesting. On the little thing they were showing, the T cells were blue-green.
Love that.
And it was just kind of like a thing of, how I was just telling him that what we observe chemically in the body is little more than the energy coming into the body, being transduced through the chakras, and then turned into chemistry within the body. And it's kind of, so what science is always observing is kind of like they're kind of saying all this stuff come down, and when it turns into matter or chemicals, that's what they can observe. And for me, learning about all the stuff coming with all of my esoteric knowledge, I started seeing what all I knew esoterically looked like under a microscope.
How fun is that?
Big
well,
fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So wisdom, as you mentioned, is to the brain what love is to the heart. So that's where we have a little clue, a little hint here that we really need to be balanced, but we've been so exclusively indoctrinated and conditioned to using brain, to honor brain, and to leave the heart completely out of it, and even mock anyone who would lean towards using the heart. That's just been one of the ploys to, in the past, prevent us from really uniting, not just in our own body, but uniting as a humanity, as a whole, as a collective, which is an essential component, I believe, of this return to cosmic or Christ consciousness. We have felt so isolated until the World Wide Web came to us, right? And so with this, it's like the trees of the forest being able to communicate and send nutrients to each other and warn the other trees of impending, perhaps, parasites, right, or whatever, harmful bacteria, whatever. They do that through the mycelium and through the root system. It's the same for us. Although right now we have internet, we really are so close to not even needing that. We are an indomitable force collectively, and that's what we are waking up to. And it's certainly part of the Kundalini, the cosmic Kundalini is happening to each of us individually. And the planet. Mm-hmm. And the planet herself.
Well, it's
and that's the 33 degrees. That's the 33 degrees that Masonry speaks of. It's the 33 segments of the spinal column.
Right.
And there's that could be another entire mystic view if we wanted to start naming all the stars of the system that we call our heavens, and to find that they are actually named in the human body, the same name. Mm-hmm. The exact same name.
That sounds like a great program.
Oh, it would be so fun. And it all comes to the pineal gland. Mm-hmm. So
let me say I want to say a great show and not a program.
Yeah, it would be great time to share with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just going, kind of speaking from, let's call it race memory and rather than, past life memory or whatever. Prior to, it's called the Enlightenment or Descartes and that kind of what I'll call very left brain thinking, humanity was actually very right brained, the average person. I mean, right brain to the part of being highly superstitious. I mean, there can, just like we're now too left brained. At one point, we were almost overly right brain. Now, people who went to the mystery schools were brought into balance. But rather than the very analytical person that's the common person today, we had almost the opposite of the very superstitious, somebody who lived in the world of mythos. Which, and you can see that in the language. And it just, and, let's just take something like a wizard in history. That when you were in the earlier days when people were very right brain and very superstitious, it was really kind of quite easy to create things just by using a few, casting a spell, putting out a group of words, creating language that would create a psychological set, and boom, the things would happen for them. So that's why sometimes when we read some of the about some of the things, at least prior to 1400 or prior before, like Descartes and the Enlightenment. The people are reporting in many ways things that are true, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were quite open to being led imaginatively. I just thought I would throw that in for whatever reason. And so what we're doing now is rebalancing, coming out of that left brain and coming back where it's almost like the two halves of a V8 or a V6. It's just they need to work together to go forward. Either way, without one side or the other operating too much, and you have imbalance, and you will not perceive reality as best as we can through the senses that we have.
And I am so appreciative that you brought that forward, because that was part of what I was talking about in the balance. I just got carried away on some other on the heart and the brain, but that is absolutely where I was going. I wanted to include that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely vital that we stay centered, that we actually engage both sides of our brain, the creative and the logical.
And I feel that's really the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Like gnosis means to know, but this knowing is more of a wisdom knowing. It's almost knowing as you need to know. It's not like having a whole library. It's kind of like being hooked into the internet, whereas you need something, you can just do a search and you get what you need.
Well, it's all frequency, and that's exactly how you tap into the gnosis of the cosmos. It's a frequency, and as soon as you match that frequency, you're transported to that information. If you want to look at it, it's all actually a part of us. We're all one. It's part of the collective that we are. But you're describing exactly how to do it. And
I guess I would like to counsel people who are, part of the New Age community, part of the alternative community, where we're kind of always looking for one more piece, and I might get this figured out. And that's kind of the pursuit of knowledge. And the pursuit of knowledge is good, but it can also put you down in a lot of rabbit holes, and all you do is come out with more rabbit poo on you rather than greater knowledge. And wisdom, I feel wisdom is something you don't get from your brain. It's something you get from your heart. Your brain contributes, is a contributing editor, so to speak. But the wisdom, that knowing the right thing to do in a given moment, which is wisdom, will come from your heart center.
Very much so. It is a feeling. And that's how you can learn the language of frequency, is by following it through feeling.
Yeah, there are certain feelings you might get and you'll experience them lower, and as you pull them into your heart chakra for observation, very often those feelings fall apart if they're not valid. The real ones will get there. The other ones kind of dissemble, and you start seeing that they're kind of just shadows on the wall, so to speak.
And something is that endures.
Yes, what endures. Always comes back to what endures.
It does.
And hold on to what endures, especially when a lot of what doesn't endure just happens to be cluttering things because, something gets kicked up. Like I said, these are times where a lot will be coming up for examination. And I would say don't get lost in the examination. Hold on to what endures and observe.
That's perfect.
Yeah. So
what are we going to have for good news? What are we going to have for good news? Or am I cutting you short? Do you have more to share?
Only you just kind of, if you cut me short, it was me mentioning good news, and just that I guess in this conclusion is the good news is that I would say stop worrying about Nibiru. This is not about don't have an interest in it, but really I would, anybody who's kind of threatening doom and gloom, please consider that suspect, at least for us humans. As we know, some of the stuff that's out there is kind of from people that don't have our best interests. And for them, this might actually represent doom and gloom, because it might be a shift that they're not ready to make. And so if they, they just might be just trying, and they know if they can get people riled up and in enough fear, you can't think clearly when you're in fear. Adrenaline is not a thinking drug, it's a moving drug. And it actually, when adrenaline is released through fear, your brain, which normally is demanding most of your blood, actually has to give some of it up so that your muscles can be ready for action. So to go into fear and to be adrenalized is to lose your higher cerebral capacity or some of it. And if you're trying to figure out the mysteries of the universe, you really want all of your cerebral cortex to process the information so your heart has something decent to make a decision on.
Yes, and to identify those subtle nuances that are actually frequency you may want to revisit.
All right. Well, I hope this was useful. Again, a little science, a little personal knowledge, a little opinion, and speaking about Nibiru. So thank you so much for again, Shelley, for being a regular co-host on the show. It's just it's been wonderful for the Mystic View.
Thank you. Absolutely. So much my pleasure. Love being here with you.
All right. Thank you all, and God bless.